If the inner work you're doing feels real but hard to explain, there's a reason for that. Rosicrucians weren't secret to be mysterious. They taught indirectly because inner transformation couldn't be taught safely or publicly at the time. What I teach here isn't different. It's the same inner process made practical, so it can be experienced directly through the body. Many people sensed that what the Rosicrucians pointed to was important. Symbols can point the way, but they don't show you actually what happens inside the body as transformation unfolds. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the stages that they describe: purification, illumination, transformation, and union, and explain what each one looked like in lived bodily experience. No belief is required. You don't have to join anything. And this isn't philosophy. It's a description of an inner process that you might already be experiencing. Some of what I'll share may challenge how these stages are usually explained, especially what comes after illumination. When Rosicrucians spoke about purification, they weren't talking about trying to become morally perfect or spiritually good. They were talking about removing what blocks inner change so that happens naturally. Rosicrucians described purification using alchemical language: lead into gold, darkness into light. That wasn't a metaphor for mental self-improvement. It was describing the transformation of dense, stored tension. In modern terms, this is trauma, emotional memory, and unresolved experience stored in the nervous system and connective tissue. This is what I mean by purification and what they were pointing to. Not suppressing emotions, but fully feeling them until they neutralize in the body, until they transmute. When emotions are fully felt, the resistance holding them in place dissolves. That resistance isn't just psychological, it's physical. It lives in the fascia, in the connective tissue, and in the nervous system. As that resistance releases, the tissues soften, and energy begins to flow where it couldn't before. This is purification at a bodily level. And this matters more than most people realize, because without this stage, what happens next either doesn't happen or happens in a way the body cannot integrate. Rosicrucians also spoke about moral and ethical refinement. But this wasn't something that was meant to be forced. When emotional charge dissipates, reactivity naturally reduces, clarity increases, and compassion and discernment arise on their own, naturally. That's not something that's morally imposed on you. It's regulation restored within you. Rosicrucians often used rituals and initiations to convey this process, not because the rituals caused transformation, but because they didn't have the language to describe what was going on inside the body. The symbols pointed to an inner process that had to be experienced, not memorized. Purification does not complete the path. It prepares the body, your body. It removes enough resistance that energy can move, awareness can turn inward, and deeper change can begin. Illumination starts to follow naturally, not as a goal, but as a consequence. So when I talk about emotional release, it's the same path. It's purification in different words. I'm describing the same inner process the Rosicrucians were pointing to, but in clear, practical terms, so it can be experienced directly instead of symbolized. When Rosicrucians spoke about illumination, they were describing the same path once meant by enlightenment, the state of being light within. What's changed is not the process, but the meaning of the word enlightenment. Today, enlightenment is often treated as a concept or identity. I believe that originally it referred to a physical and energetic transformation of the human system. As emotional tension releases through purification, resistance leaves the tissues. That resistance isn't abstract. It lives in the nervous system, in the fascia, in the body itself. When enough of that resistance dissolves, energy begins flowing through areas of the body where previously it was blocked. This is the first sense in which illumination is literal. The body becomes more conductive. Light can move. If you've experienced parts of this already, you may recognize what I'm describing, even if you've never had language for it. When sufficient resistance is released, that is when Kundalini can ignite. Kundalini marks a threshold, not a destination. Many spiritual paths stop here, treating the experience itself as a goal. Others focus on stabilizing or managing the energy that's moving. But from the body's perspective, this is the moment when deeper transformation becomes possible. Kundalini is not subtle. It can feel like a powerful electric current burning through the body. The energy is massive, so strong that it can feel like other people around you should be able to feel it. This intensity is one reason why Kundalini has often been treated with caution. Kundalini itself isn't dangerous, but if it arises before the body has released enough resistance, it can feel overwhelming or destabilizing. That's why people sometimes describe Kundalini as frightening. It's not because something has gone wrong. It's because the system isn't prepared to conduct that amount of energy. When emotional and physical tension has been released gradually, the body becomes capable of conducting energy. The nervous system can regulate. The fascia can conduct energy without strain. And in that context, Kundalini doesn't harm the system. It completes the opening. It burns through deeper layers of tension that emotional work alone cannot reach. This is why Kundalini should not be forced. It isn't something you should try to raise. It happens when the system is ready for it. When it arises naturally, it feels powerful but coherent, intense but not chaotic. Once it has done its work, it subsides, and awareness can turn inward. At this point, awareness is no longer limited to the outside world, or to thought, or to emotion. It can rest inside the physical body itself. This is what older traditions meant by inner sight, or the opening of the inner or third eye. It isn't imagination, it's sensing. You can sense inside tissues, inside bones, and eventually inside the skull, the kingdom of God. This is also the stage where the Rosy cross can form. Not because you're trying to create it, because you couldn't, but because the fascia and the tissues reorganize as awareness turns inward. The cross is a physical confirmation that the system has reached a new level of coherence. In Rosicrucian symbolism, illumination and the Rosy cross were closely linked. They were pointing to the same internal shift, described symbolically because they lacked the language to describe the body directly. The Rosicrucian tradition understood the magnitude of this stage. They knew that inner transformation could be described, but not fully understood through the mind alone. So illumination was taught indirectly, through symbol, image, and initiation. Not to be mysterious, but because this stage only becomes clear through lived experience. As illumination progresses, as more resistance releases, other changes appear naturally. Clarity increases. Reactivity decreases. Worldview shifts. Moral and ethical alignment deepens. Not because rules are followed, but because the tension driving the old patterns is gone. These aren't goals, they're consequences. Historically, many traditions treated illumination as the end of the path. But in the body, it clearly isn't. It's one threshold. Once awareness can move inside the body, a deeper phase becomes possible. Not symbolic transformation, but physical transformation. Most spiritual traditions describe inner light, awakening, or expanded awareness, but they don't explain what happens next. Transformation is what happens after illumination starts. They go hand in hand, but illumination has to start first. This is where the body itself begins to change. This is the part that almost no tradition explains clearly, not because it's unimportant, but because very few people reached it. Once awareness can work directly inside the body, the work changes completely. Up until now, tension has been released indirectly through emotions, memories, or sensations. But as illumination progresses, those veils have been removed, and awareness can work directly with the tissues themselves. This is a fundamental shift. You're no longer processing the past with the mind. You're processing it directly in the body. Transformation doesn't mean becoming something new. It means releasing what never belonged in the body in the first place. Tension stored in the fascia begins to unwind. Adhesions soften. Restrictions release. And as they do, the body starts returning to its natural alignment. This is not metaphorical. It's physical, structural. As fascia releases, bones are no longer held in their distorted positions. They begin to shift. The skull changes shape. The spine reorganizes. Posture improves without effort. In my own case, my skull bones moved into more alignment and are continuing to do so. And as my neck expanded, I've grown about an inch in my 50s. This happens because the body is no longer bracing against or compensating for the past. Other traditions clearly didn't describe this phase, not because it wasn't real, but because very few people reached it and because there was no language to explain connective tissue, fascia, or nervous system regulation. So transformation remains symbolic. Resurrection, rebirth, glorification. What they were pointing to was physical, but that wasn't put into words. This isn't about stretching, manipulation, or trying to fix the body. You don't push bones into place. You don't force realignment. Awareness does the work. When awareness is placed gently on tension and held there, the tissue releases on its own, strand by strand, layer by layer. This stage isn't instant. The body has spent decades compensating for stored tension. You can go as fast or as slow as you want, but your body will unwind at its own pace. There is more work to do than you could ever imagine. But the direction is clear. You will be led and will experience more ease, more alignment, more lightness, and less effort. When Rosicrucians spoke about transformation, they often meant inner birth or resurrection. They were pointing to the same phase of returning the body to its original blueprint, but without a way to describe the mechanics. What I teach is not different. It's the same process made visible through the body. Transformation isn't chasing experiences. It isn't trying to perfect the body, although that happens naturally along the way. It isn't about trying to become spiritually advanced, although that happens naturally too. It's about undoing what tension has done, letting the body return to coherence. As the unwinding becomes complete, something else becomes possible. Awareness no longer just moves inside the body. It becomes able to rest inside the place where awareness comes from. This is what the Rosicrucians called union, and some call self-realization, or oneness with God. Not union as a belief, but as a lived reality. Union is often described in spiritual traditions in ways that feel abstract or dramatic. Merging with God, dissolving into oneness, transcending the body. That kind of language makes union seem unattainable or distant. But when you strip the language away, what those traditions were pointing to is much simpler. Union is not something added. It's what remains when resistance has gone. Step 1. The work has always been unwinding. Everything leading up to this point has followed the same pattern. Emotional memory release, trauma releases, tension stored in tissues, fascia and bones releases. Nothing new is created. What's already there is gradually unbound. As this unwinding progresses, awareness becomes less obstructed. It no longer has to push past tightness to move through the body. It no longer gets caught on unresolved tension. Awareness simply moves and rests with less resistance. Step 2. Space opens within the skull. As deeper layers release, tension inside the face and skull begins to unwind. The internal space of the skull starts to feel free, open and empty, not conceptually, but sensorially, energetically. As long as there is tension in this area, awareness cannot move freely. When that tension releases, awareness is no longer held away from its origin. Step 3. Awareness can rest where it comes from. At a certain point, awareness can rest in the place that the awareness stems from. This isn't something that needs to be forced. It becomes possible only because resistance is no longer preventing it. Nothing special is added. Nothing mystical needs to occur. Awareness simply no longer has anywhere else it is being pulled to. Step 4. The sense of separation changes. Many traditions describe this stage as the dissolution of the separate self. In my experience, what dissolves is not the self, but the tension that created the feeling of separation. The sense of me has always been linked to contraction, to unresolved emotional memories, resistance in the body, tension in the skull. As those layers release, the sense of a center doesn't disappear. It becomes clearer, more localized, more accessible. Step 5. What traditions called union. This is what many traditions referred to as union. Awareness resting within the bony cave where awareness comes from, because nothing is resisting it anymore. I want to be clear about this. I'm not presenting union as a completed endpoint that I've reached. I'm not speaking from finality. What I'm describing is a direction, one that becomes increasingly obvious as resistance continues to release. What can be known, even before completion, is the mechanism. As long as there is tension, awareness is shaped by it. As resistance dissolves, awareness is no longer distorted. And when distortion ends, what remains doesn't need to be achieved. It's already here. Union doesn't come from belief. It doesn't come from devotion. It doesn't come from striving. It comes from unwinding, from doing the ordinary, unglamorous work of meeting what's stored in the body and allowing it to release. Again and again, layer by layer. Union isn't becoming something new. It's the absence of what was never you to begin with. So when you look at this path as a whole, nothing here is abstract. What the Rosicrucians described here through symbol, allegory, and initiation maps directly onto a process that unfolds in the body. Purification is the gradual release of stored emotional memory, meeting what's held in the nervous system and connective tissue until it no longer lives as tension or reactivity. Illumination emerges as resistance releases. The body becomes more conductive. Energy begins to move, and awareness turns inward in a very literal, physical way. Transformation is the deeper unwinding, working directly with tension in the tissue, fascia and bones, allowing the structure of the body itself to reorganize and soften. And union is not something added at the end. It's what remains once all the resistance has fallen away. What matters here is that none of these stages are beliefs. They aren't identities, they aren't titles you achieve, and they aren't experiences that you chase. They're descriptions of what happens when awareness meets what's held in the body and stays long enough for it to release. This work takes time. It takes noticing. It takes returning again and again to sensation, emotion, and tension, instead of avoiding it or thinking your way around it. There's no bypass here, and there's no rushing it without consequence. That's why I don't teach this as a philosophy, and I don't teach it as a spiritual ideal. I teach it as a process, one that unfolds at a pace that the body allows, and one that doesn't require faith, only awareness, patience, and a willingness to feel what's already there. If this sounds like the path you want to take, then the work begins and continues exactly where you are, with what your body is holding, with what your awareness is already touching. And if there's one thing I'd like you to take away from this, it's this. Real inner transformation isn't mysterious. It isn't symbolic. It isn't passive. It's embodied. It's participatory. And it's far more grounded than most spiritual teachings ever made it sound. If you want a practical way to begin this process step by step, here's my Inner Peace Masterclass that walks you through the steps. And my 5-step blueprint to profound inner peace is available for free from my website, Hince.com. Please take a moment to give this video a thumbs up. It helps the algorithm to share it with others like you. And please subscribe to my channel. It's totally free. Thanks for watching.